I always loved animation, always loved comics from a very young age.
I never even thought or had an idea that animation could be a career.
Well, I began my career as a graphic designer. I had no dream about being an animator.
I wanted to be an animator, but I did not know how to be an animator. I wasn't really encouraged to do much drawing when I was a child, but I would still do it anyway because that's what I loved. Fast forward a few years later, after my academic journey, I realized that I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be affiliated somehow with the art industry.
One student actually came to me and he told me, like, sir, animation is like graphic design in motion. So I said, okay. So he himself introduced me to software. Imagine I'm learning from my student. So I locked myself in a room for a weekend and I taught myself that software. At the time it was Macromedia Flash, and I fell in love with animation. And I said, hey, I want to pursue that as my career.
I used to be doing drawings of Dragon Ball Z cartoons in primary school, and I used to sell it to my peers and so on. That really kicked off for me when I got to St. Mary's College under Ted's tutelage. Then I started to learn about drawing and perspective and then painting.
Theater production culture seemed to have taken a dip. And during that lag, I met or got in contact with a gentleman called Phil Phillips out of Barbados now. Phil Phillips was repping Toon Boom Animation at the time. And he sort of opened my eyes to the fact that producing animation wasn't so difficult anymore because of the technology that was developed by Toon Boom.
I wrote a little children's book, a little story, and I had drawn a few illustrations. I hadn't done any kind of illustration since I'd left secondary school. And one day, I was in my office and it was like something hit me in my head. And I just started creating a business plan, and it just flowed like water. And on that business plan was animation, but I had animation down as a very future eventuality.
The reason that I got into animation, I kind of fell into it in a strange sense because I did a bunch of things before. I did tattoos, I did body art, I did theater for a little while. I danced, and it was one afternoon I found out that there was an opportunity for me to jump into animation. I went, I checked out the space, and I figured, okay, I'm gonna jump in this thing 110%.
I think it was one Sunday. I don't usually get the Sunday paper, but for some reason, something made me get up and go to the gas station and just purchase the Sunday paper. Once I got back and I read it, there was an ad in the employment section that said animators wanted, we will train. And I was floored. I was like, what?
I remember I would leave home from 7 in the morning, get into that space, do as much practice as I can, work on as much content as I can, and then leave like midnight, 7 days a week for years.
Everybody drinking up, we party until the sun up. Push, push, balance,
until I got myself up to a point where I was confident enough to say that I was an animator.
I had a really slow computer, not to mention that computer is being shared by all my other brothers. So it's when I get a little chance and I would just go through the headache of doing little animation, but it was very challenging not having the right resources and stuff.
Angela, you really nasty.
Probably when I started working was when I really started to take animation serious, when I could have purchased my own powerful laptops and so on. I started to watch tutorials, learn a lot, follow artists online, do different things just to get myself up to par in the animation industry.
I went on to do my bachelor's degree in media arts and animation at the Art Institute. I then opened my business. Actually, I opened a business to pay my tuition at the Art Institute.
There was a crooked man, Jimmy.
Since Saint Lucia is very small and animation was something different here, it started to pick up and I started getting little gigs, animated gigs for different companies.
My work primarily comes from out of the country.
As long as you have enough of a workforce to roll over and your studio is well supported and it's able to provide the service, you will get those studios out there who will outsource their work to you.
Signed the Treaty of Bastille, establishing a new organization for cooperation among their countries, the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States.
That part of outsourcing work will never stop, actually. Because in the old days, when we were doing traditional animation, you had something like about 600 animators in one location. Studios have found that to be unwieldy and not economical per se.
We work more on the international than we do on the local. But it's not to say that we haven't had some good local projects, but those local projects, as you said, they're more PSAs, more informational videos. They're not entertainment based. Whereas when we work on the international, we work more in the entertainment industry.
Right now, I would say that I have a balance of work from overseas and locally. At different times in the year, it would change. So for example, during the Christmas season and during Carnival, the Carnival season, I will get a lot of work from the local companies. A lot of work for Carnival, I'll get a lot of work from the artists. So for this year, I produced two animated music videos. And I think two lyric videos from Saint Lucia as well.
A number of the jobs that we have gotten from outside of Saint Lucia.
I did some work for this show called Dallas and Robo. At first, when I started off, I was doing simple prop management. So what do? You would get the prop designs from the studios, and then because it was a puppet style animation show, you would have to break those puppets down so that the animators could now take these assets, and use them in the bigger scenes.
We got thrown into the deep end of the ocean with Rick and Morty.
Hey, look, Morty, I'm a leg.
You know, I have a show. At this point, Cartoon Network is like screaming for it. It's because the fans, I think they had aired a few of the episodes and the fan base grew very, very quickly. So the fans were like, where's the rest? Where's the rest? And he's like, okay, look, we got some scenes, you know, you guys can work on it.
I still get work overseas, but it's from St. Lucians who are based overseas.
I've also done animation for the show called HBO Animal Season 3. It's an adult animation show centered on animals. It was crazy, adult stuff. I've also done children's animation.
We also worked for CrossQ for CARICOM, where they had their informational videos.
I have worked for different companies, such as New America Financial, which was a very big deal for me because I pushed myself to the limit to do that particular ad it was promoting their institution. I have collaborated with different artists in Trinidad, Grenada, Jamaica, England, South Korea. Right now, I would say that the world is pretty small because we are all connected.
That's when I truly realized that animation was a lot bigger than what I thought. So there were animators from all over the world. You had directors screaming at each other. Like literally, it was like looking at Trello and watching this whole thing unfold.
Roddy had always been my mentor and supporter. I mean, I've worked both with Roddy and with Derek, but Roddy was the first director of culture here, and knowing me from little, he sort of encouraged me every time we met, every time we spoke. If he had a production, I was involved.
My main inspiration came from, first person I would say was Ted Sandiford, my art teacher. Because he was just so diverse. He could have drawn, he could have painted.
It was my art teacher, I would say he discovered me, Mr. Guy Marco at the time. And then he left and Mr. St. Omer started to teach me from Form 4. While I was at St. Mary's College, I used to draw everything.
My very first source of learning animation outside of my outside of peer-to-peer reviewing was YouTube. So there were a bunch of different people. I remember early on there was this guy called Cubum Lee, exceptional animator.
I know we all tend to like anime and stuff, so I'll start with that. Hayao Miyazaki, he did the Castles in the Sky. I love that. I absorb anything that's animation and most things that's film. And it does not necessarily have to be any particular style once there is a good story. In terms of theater, like I said, Roddy, for both theater and writing. In terms of theater, again, we talk about Kendall Hiplett.
Richard Williams is one of the old men who worked on a lot of the Disney films, and he put out this thing called the Animation Survival Guide, and that thing is pretty much a Bible for animators.
And when I got into 3D, well, 3D, there are so many influences. Right now, I pretty much just go on Instagram and I just follow as many 3D artists that I can follow. But right now, one guy who is a big inspiration for me, his name is Jorge Vigara, and he's done animation for Sony.
Okay, so Richard Williams, in his book and his videos, he would talk about like the mannerisms he would have to replicate in animation, like walk cycles, for example. Like the walk cycle of a man and a woman is different simply because of our biology. A woman has wider hips, so the hips swing more. So these are the type of things that you would look at in a walk cycle and be able to just differentiate it just by how the walk is. He also mentioned the importance of physics in animation and how using reference is a favorable part of the animation process.
The biggest influence I got as an artist was from the St. Omer family, because Dunstan St. Omer, the father, he was, I would say he could have done anything, because I thought he just used to be doing those black Madonnas that you saw. You've seen the cathedral and these kinds of things. But then I saw an architectural piece of a building for grand use of perspective. And then I met his sons who had different skill sets in art. So Luigi would be into abstract and so on. Alwyn would be into the cartoon characters, graphic designing and so on, but he would still do the fine arts, you know. But I took to Alwyn's work. So when I saw Alwyn he did a comic strip. I think it was Sukuyon or something like that.
Of course, I grew up in the era of Saturday morning cartoons. So today where streaming is accessible and you could watch cartoons at any time of the day, I had to either wait until school was finished and you only got a few shows. Like you would get Sesame Street, and then you would have cartoons like Gummy Bears and Thundercats and so on.
When I started 2D animation, my main inspiration for 2D was a guy named Adam Phillips. Now he's not like a popular animator, because he doesn't work for like any large studio. He literally does animation by himself. So he used to create films all by himself and very compelling stories. He used to do sound effects. He used to write his own stories. And I used to follow his streams, watching him spend months just drawing animation and designing the backgrounds, doing effects. He used to do almost every aspect of the 2D animation pipeline. And I used to be quite amazed by how he used to do that.
A young adult, I really didn't follow cartoons much. It was really not until I had my daughter and I really started looking at what she was watching, and I wanted everything to be educational. So that influences me, especially with my own IP with Zana. I tend to focus on educational and environmental.
It starts with the script. So you get a good script, and then what your storyboard artist does is take that script and interpret it into images that will later on guide the process of animation production. Then it moves on to the character designers who will now create those characters. And then those characters or those drawings have to be broken down into bits that then are able to be moved through a process called rigging.
Where you have to put almost joints in these characters so that you can manipulate them and move them. That's a job by itself. And then you have animation to manipulate that puppet and bring life to it. That's a job by itself. Then you have lighting and rendering artists that put lights, that worry about backgrounds and how the entire scene looks. Then you have post-production artists. When you look at any credits in any movie, you will see the breakdown of all these different skill sets that come into a production. So that's why it's so expensive, because if you want high quality animation, you would have to get individuals who specialize in certain aspects of the pipeline so that they can perform their best on certain aspects of the pipeline.
But then also you need to have the backgrounds and maybe assets that move or interact in the background. So you have artists that do that as well.
Writers are an integral part of the production pipeline.
What we do sometimes is we have a brainstorming session between the producer, who is junior, the animators, Shem & Co, and myself, and we'll hammer out some ideas, we'll throw out stuff, and then I'll take it and I'll distill it into the script.